Today's guest, David Liu, is the founder of Kinjo, a 14-seat omakase counter and cocktail lounge in Dumbo, New York. Previously, David also spent time as an oyster farmer and was previously the co-founder of the popular wedding website, The Knot. David, really excited to have you on the podcast for opening soon today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Alan. This is fun.
Well, really excited to dive into Kinjo and what you're doing there. But before that, we have to hear about how you started The Knot with your wife. Could you give us a little bit of background on how that came about and that 20-year plus journey?
Oh my God. I'll give you the shortened version because that will take at least two more podcasts to go into. But
Yeah.
we started that business back in 1995, 96. The internet was, an idea more or less. The online access was primarily gotten through AOL and CompuServe. We had this idea of creating a content business, and we thought weddings would be a good one considering how much advertising and how much commerce flows through that. It was a lot of hard work and a lot of good luck. And I think the product we were able to create were actually addressed a lot of needs and problems that a lot of young couples had when they're planning a wedding.
Sure.
And so we were fortunate. We went public in '99. And I ran it as a public company for almost 20 years, and it was sold to private equity back in 2018. And so I really should be retired,
Yeah.
but I have Dan Chu to blame.
I see. And I guess throughout that journey of starting The Knot to then being interested in, farming oysters and even starting a hospitality group, how does that translate into what you're doing now?
Well, so actually, when I left The Knot, I sort of told myself I didn't want to have anything to do with anything related to digital or technology ever again. After 20 years of that, and riding the different waves of, when broadband came on, it completely disrupted our business, and then mobile came on, and that disrupted our business, and then so it was just constant, chasing the technology. And I joke that when we left. Starting a oyster farm was as analog as it gets. It was never disrupted by AI or technology, or maybe they'll get a robot that can dig through the mud. And with omakase, it's a restaurant is also pretty analog too. You're not going to get displaced by technology there as well. But I think also one of the things that helped inform a lot of what we're doing here is that you spend 20 years working on this wedding planning site. The reality is most of our business was coming from supporting local vendors. We had over 600,000 florists, photographers, bridal salons, venues, hotels. And you realize that, number one, helping this group transition into the new digital age was really important, but you really learned about the value of hospitality and customer service, and really servicing a client that I would argue is probably the most demanding, the highest stakes. This is not a reservation for 5 for dinner. This is like someone's wedding, and so everything had to be perfect. And I have such respect for the people who are in that industry because every weekend it's like you're opening a Broadway show and you're feeding your audience at the same time. It's a high pressure, high stakes activity, and the industry I think taught me a lot about what it takes to actually produce a great experience.
Are there any particular battle scars or anecdotes you could point to about one of these weddings that you had to go through?
Fortunately, I was not on the front lines of that. My battle scars were dealing with hedge fund managers and activist shareholders and the finance side. I think Carly, my wife, was one who's the consumer facing brand ambassador, and she traveled and zigzagged the country going to different bridal shows and speaking engagements, and really became the leading expert in weddings for the country. It was on the Today Show, Oprah, Good Morning America, and so I think the actual planning of a wedding, we wound up avoiding getting into the details of.
Got it. Okay. So, you spent 20 years in digital. You went through the .com bust, you went through the Great Recession, and you're just like, okay, I want to do something that's as far away from digital internet as possible. And you start an oyster farm, or you bought an oyster farm. Is that correct? Tell
But
me about how that happened.
yeah, I was on the board of a company, and one of our fellow board members happened to live in this area in the Pacific Northwest. It's called the Willapa Bay. It's been written up as the cleanest bay in North America, and
Hmm.
it's just beautiful and pristine. It's a massive body of water, and one of the sort of unique attributes of it is that close to 80% of the water moves out on every tidal turn. So it replenishes with like
Wow.
fresh ocean water. And so, oysters are filter feeders. And so, it's been written up as the cleanest bay. And we suddenly realized, well, if you're going to eat a filter feeder, wouldn't you want it to come from the cleanest bay in North America? And isn't there an opportunity to do that? And my partner in the business now, who lives out there, said, listen, we have an opportunity to, maybe I'll buy some oyster seeds and put them in bags, float them out in the bay, because he had a house right on the bay. And he goes, I can
Hmm.
guarantee by next year we'll be able to sell them, because he did marketing for Amazon and saw that there was a lot of searches on oysters, and the local oyster farmers were kind of selling mostly commercially or their dredge, so it wasn't the half shell oyster product. And so we started doing this, and we started kind of trying to promote the area, because like most people, you don't hear of Willapa Bay, even though it produces some insane percentage of our seafood in America, in that
Oh,
one area.
interesting.
And we suddenly got contacted by one of these old farmers who had this farm, and he said, "Listen, you know, I'm 68 years old. I'm ready to retire. My kids don't want to be oyster farmers. We see what you're doing and promoting the area. It's wonderful. Would you like to maybe buy my farm?" And what was happening in parallel was that this is right after 2018. We had, the knot was sold, and Carla and I, we had generated a decent amount of capital gains, and don't want to get political about this, but it was in the middle of the first Trump administration, and
Hmm.
I was like, you know what, I don't want my capital gains tax dollars to go support this administration. It's just, I feel like it's morally wrong.
Hmm.
Now, turns out within that big tax bill, that first tax bill that Trump passed, the
Yeah.
Dems and Cory Booker had put in a provision for what they call opportunity funds. And if an
Ah.
opportunity fund it had to be created with capital gains, and then if you invested in opportunity zones that were designated by the governors, you could defer your tax payment by 10 years. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
done. I was like, so we set up an opportunity fund. And at the time, my wife and I were looking for businesses or things to invest in New York and Brooklyn, where we're from, and there was like there's a clock ticking too. If you don't deploy your cash, you're going to get penalized because you haven't paid the cap gains. And so it turns out that this whole area of the Willapa Bay is an opportunity zone. It's
Wow.
incredibly poor, and it's a bunch of oyster farmers, and so we wound up buying this guy's farm, and the pandemic hit. All the commercial contracts started canceling, and we're like, "Oh my God, what do we do?" And the guy's like, "Nothing. The oysters just keep living in the water. You don't have to do anything," which was like kind of a mind-blowing experience. And then we had
Oh,
another
that's
farm come up to us and say, "Hey, we see what you're doing over Stony Point. Would you be interested in our farm? We have this wonderful store and like a deck that you can actually have oysters and wine." And so we wound up buying these two farms. We have over 300 acres of oyster beds, and I believe that makes us one of the top 20 oyster farms in the country, like sort of
wow.
overnight.
So I had thought that opportunity zones were mostly focused on housing or building affordable housing, but you can also buy a business in an opportunity zone, and that qualifies as well.
Exactly, and I
That's
think
incredible.
it was designed, and obviously, Trump and his friends were very much focused on the real estate play of it.
Yeah.
We were more interested as entrepreneurs to
Yeah.
support businesses and to try to buy or grow businesses, and so
Oh, I
it
love that.
worked out well for us. Um,
Okay. And tell me about what even a bed of oyster means. So 300 beds. Like what is that
no,
production
300
like?
acres. It's actually 300 acres.
Oh, 300 acres.
Yeah. so so this is one of the few places in America where we actually own the water, or you own the beds, because the tide goes out and actually exposes the mud. In most places, you own up to the high tide line, like you
Okay.
can't own the water. But here, it's like when the bay's filled up, there are designated markers where our oysters are there and our beds are there. And so, just to put this into context, when we closed the first acquisition, I remember at the closing, I was saying, okay, how many oysters are we talking about? And I had heard it was like 800,000 oysters. It was a 20-acre farm, and at the closing, the gentleman who was selling was like, "Oh, no, no, no! It's not 800,000 oysters. We harvest on a 4-year cycle, so it's 800,000 every year. It's actually 3.2 million oysters. So there are 3.2 million oysters on 20 acres that we had. The second farm they
Wow.
came in, and it happened to ask for the exact amount that we had left in our in our fund, was 280 acres.
Oh
So
my
we have now
God.
over 300 acres, and so you can imagine there's a lot of oysters out there.
That's over, yeah, 10. I mean, you're 50, 100 million oysters
There are millions of
every,
oysters.
and oysters are harvested every 4 years instead of every,
He was, depending on. I mean, there's so. I mean, I've learned so much about oyster farming now, which is
yeah, yeah,
insane.
yeah.
But depending on where your beds are situated, if you're closer to the mouth of the bay, the water moves quicker. And depending on where it sits in the water table, there are nutrients that are on the higher levels of the water. And so, if your beds are kind of closer to that zone, they grow faster. So
Hmm.
you can bring a seed to actual maturation to be ready for harvest within a year. Um,
Okay.
it could be that quick.
Wow.
The beds that we have there, because it's also not contiguous. It's like there's little spots everywhere in the bay that we own, and so the areas where the water doesn't move as fast, the oysters grow a lot slower.
I
And
see.
and but then there's also a different flavor profile. The terroir is different from different parts. It's wild.
Miroir being the opposite of terroir in
Exactly.
France. That's a
Exactly.
term. Wow, I haven't heard that before. But cool.
Yeah.
So if we are eating an oyster maybe from Washington State, there's a good chance that it's yours.
Yeah, we haven't done that much distribution right now. The STK steak houses
Yeah.
in are serving our oysters.
Okay.
We've really primarily focused on servicing a lot of the local places right now, and
I see.
our dream was to really kind of build out the brand and to maybe even go direct to consumer at some point when that became more feasible.
Hmm.
The pandemic sort of like really put a stop to that and paused us for a while. So we're now getting back up to speed and trying to grow the wholesale side and building out the brand.
Yeah. Well, I mean, people are even doing the direct consumer for Alaskan salmon and just
Yeah,
shipping, a bunch of salmon over. I see those ads all the time. I
yeah,
haven't seen the ones for oysters yet, but maybe that makes sense too.
yeah. The challenge with oysters is like no one really wants to shuck them. It's like
Ah,
it's hard, and so that'll always be a barrier. But I also think that it self-selects the customer that's like kind of a connoisseur and really wants that
sure.
experience. I mean, the other really, and I think the younger generation really appreciates the fact that oysters are probably the most environmentally friendly protein one can
Yes.
produce and eat. The oysters themselves are an incredible carbon sink because the oyster shells are sodium bicarbonate, and it like literally pulls carbon out of the water to
Hmm.
make it shell. And then all the eelgrass that grows around the oysters and the oyster beds is a more efficient carbon sink than even the Amazon rainforest. So it's like it has tremendous, benefit to the environment.
I love
So
that.
we advocate for people to eat more oysters.
Yeah. Well, that's a good pitch. So that's fun. So you bought the oyster farm in 2018,
Yeah.
and you're still running it to this day. Is that correct?
Yeah, and the joke's on me, right? Because I thought 10 years later, there won't be a Trump administration that my money will be going to because that's what my tax bills do. And guess what?
Well,
I'm
you have two more years or a year, a little bit more.
yeah, I mean, it'll be probably
Okay.
his last year of his term. So,
Yeah,
oh
I
well.
see. Okay. Well, that's a fun project, and you're doing this with your wife, Carly, as well.
Yeah, we're helping out. Honestly, the farm is really run by my partner,
Okay.
Anthony, out on the West Coast, and his family, and they're like fabulous, knowledgeable people who not only have a passion for the product and the process, but also for the ocean and the environment, and so they've been great to work with.
That's great. And how did that translate to you getting into hospitality and the restaurant industry?
Yeah, it didn't. So when I left the Knot, I really leaned into trying to help advise and sort of give back to other Asian entrepreneurs. So one of the things that I saw in my sort of almost 20-year term as a public company CEO was, I'd go to investor conferences or you go to these meetings, and oftentimes I was the only Asian face in the room.
Yeah.
And there was just this sense of like, what's going on here? Like if you were to poll people, they would say, "Oh my God, Asians are doing so well, right? They're all entrepreneurs, they're in tech," and you realize, there's this term of a bamboo ceiling that actually exists, and
Yes.
we're good enough to be a VP of engineering. We're really great for being directors of project management or whatever, but somehow getting into the C-suite, getting onto public company boards, getting elected as government officials, we are woefully underrepresented. And in fact, if you were to talk to a lot of these search firms who were, would be doing, let's say, a placement for a public company board position, back in the day when diversity was actually a priority for a lot of people, they would tell you that Asians didn't qualify as being a demographic group that, would satisfy a diversity initiative. Which, if you look at our representation, we under-index worse than any other demographic group out there in terms of our representation on these boards. And so,
Yeah.
I got involved with places like Ascend, Pinnacle. I started helping, try to get some Asian officials elected into office. I was like, it's time to figure out how to give back, because when I was coming up in the business, like, there was like Jerry Yang and me. That was it. Like maybe Steve Chen over YouTube, but like there was nobody. Like you couldn't find anyone to like actually network with. And I think this younger generation has really embraced I think the mission, and I started meeting with a lot of great people, and some VCs would send entrepreneurs to me, and be like, hey, give this guy advice, open your Rolodex. And strangely, because I ran a wedding related business, like my Rolodex spans everything, like from retail to luxury to travel to apparel to tech and marketing and publishing. I mean, it was like I got great connections across the board. And so
I
I was
love that.
happy to try to lean in to help. And I got a call from Bob Wu. I blame him. And he said, hey, I know these two entrepreneurs who want to meet you. And I was like, okay, it's going to be digital marketing or
Yeah.
tech related, or maybe life stage marketing. And he's like, no, it's because you lived in Dumbo for 30 years and they're interested in opening a restaurant. And
Oh.
I was like, oh, okay. I totally ascribe to the notion that to make a small fortune in restaurants, you start with a large fortune. Restaurants are
Same.
horrible businesses, horrible
Yes.
businesses.
Yes.
And I said right up the bat, I was like, selfishly, I'll meet with them because I have lived here for 30 years and there's no really good food. And every new restaurant that comes in, it comes in with a cynical notion like, oh, all these rich people live in Dumbo, and they try to gouge you with these ridiculous prices for mediocre food. So I was like, I'll meet them and see what they're trying to do. And I met with Dan, and he said, and I said my spiel about like not investing in restaurants, and he said, okay, you've raised a lot of money though, so could you take a look at my business plan, and because we need to raise money, and just give me some pointers and comments. And I looked at this plan and I was like, wait a minute, this is like a cheat code, like, or a business hack. I've never seen anything like this.
Hmm.
And what I realized was that this concept of an omakase restaurant takes everything that is hard and difficult about a restaurant and problematic as an investment in a restaurant and flips it on its head. And I suddenly was like, wait a minute, this is actually kind of interesting. And so the four major challenges, and for your listeners who are in the restaurant business, I'm probably preaching to the choir here.
Yeah.
It's like, first, you need to raise a bunch of money, right? The build out costs are minimally $500,000 just for the equipment in your kitchen. Like that doesn't even include the furnishings and the chairs and the
Renovations.
and the
Yeah.
plates and the dishes and all the nice stuff, just for your stove and your fridge and the hood and whatever. Well, an omakase restaurant, my chef needs a really good refrigerator, a rice cooker, and a torch.
Yeah.
That's it. So your build-out cost is actually pretty minimal. Um, the second killer in restaurants is your rent.
Hmm.
It's always about the location, obviously, but then if you're going to have a location and you have a large enough space to generate enough revenue, you're talking minimally 2,500 square feet, 3,000 square feet for a kind of a small, medium-sized restaurant, larger if you're really going for a big concept. And those rents will kill you. I mean, and
Yeah.
you know, our omakase restaurant, I'm comfortable at 1,100, 1,200 square feet. I can probably do it at 900 square feet. There's no such thing as a 900 square foot restaurant, and the spaces that are available for that are much more affordable, than these other formats. And so suddenly your overhead and rent is much, much lower.
Yeah.
Third killer, your staffing costs. Any medium-sized restaurant, you need at least 20 people, if not 30. Between all the back of house, front of house, if you're running, lunches or doing double shifts, it's even more people. Your payroll will kill you. And it's in a highly unstable workforce, so you're constantly like needing to staff and hire and fire, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Our omakase restaurant needs 4 people, 2 chefs, 1 back of house, one host.
Yep.
And then finally, the real kicker is, you open up a menu of a restaurant and you realize all that food that you're looking at has to be ready to be prepared. So it's defrosted, it's ready to go. I don't care how good you are as a restaurant, you can't predict how much you're going to be spending, how much you're going to be selling on any given week or any given month. And so you're going to lose 10% margin points just on food waste every month. It's just the nature of the business. Omakase is chef selection. I know precisely how many pieces of fish I'll serve every single night.
Sure.
So I can keep my food waste down to a minimum. And so suddenly you look at this, and I looked at these plans, and we did some research and talked to a bunch of these smaller operations that were popping up everywhere in New York, and you realize you can do north of 20% margins. I mean, that's unheard of in the restaurant business. If I do 5% margins in the restaurant business, I'm a hero. It's like, and so I said to Dan, I was like, okay, you've now piqued my interest. However, I'm not a restaurateur. My parents a long time ago had, partnered and had a restaurant in Flushing called the Happy Dumpling. It was brutal work. And so, I love restaurants. I love entertaining. My wife and I are sort of known for throwing great, massive dinner parties. We love doing that. But as a business, it's not something that I've ever really wanted to pursue. But I said to Dan, I was like, okay, we have an interesting business model here with this one place. But what's not interesting to me is I wouldn't want to raise a bunch of money and then, dividend out your profits to your shareholders at the end of the year. And then when your lease is up in 5 or 7 or 10 years, the landlord jacks it up and then you're out of business, right? Like that seems to be the life cycle of a lot of these successful restaurants. That's if you get past your first or second year. And I said, what is interesting is, and I don't know where you are, but like in New York, I believe there have been over 200 omakase restaurants opened in the last 18 months. That's a figure that I heard. It is an insane phenomenon, right? And part of it is because the economics are so, superior to a normal restaurant. But I'm old enough to remember people walking around the streets of New York saying, hey, have you tried this thing called sushi? It's raw fish with seaweed and rice, but it's delicious. And you realize sushi entered in the United States through LA and New York. It was considered exotic and strange from Japan. And you can't go to an American city today and not find a sushi restaurant, if not multiple sushi restaurants. And I believe that phenomenon is going to happen with omakase. That experience is going to burst out of New York and go everywhere. All the major markets have it. But I think the plan that we put together was, let's launch in Brooklyn, let's prove the concept, and then let's quickly expand into secondary cities around the country. So our
Mm,
goal is
that's the
to
plan.
build
I see.
Kinjos everywhere and as quickly as possible, because to find a trusted brand with a great product that's well priced, and that you know after a certain point you have economies of scale in both in terms of procurement of products and equipment and just all your expenses, it becomes a really scalable business. And so that's what we did, and that's how I got involved. And
That
and
makes
my
sense.
wife kind of curses the day I decided to do this. She said we should be retired. We killed ourselves for 20 years building another company, and now we're doing this. But there's something very joyful about feeding people and having people come in and kind of experience our omakase.
The basic human need, nourishment.
Yeah, exactly.
People do derive pleasure from it. That's the question I was going to ask, because to your point, there's 200 omakases opened. I was thinking, why compete in that environment? Because it's so cutthroat.
Yeah.
But I guess the second tier city expansion plan makes a lot of sense to me. I guess my question is, why not start in a second tier city? Why start in Dumbo so that you can
Yeah,
actually prove out the concept there?
yeah. So selfishly, because there was no good food here, and I live here, so I wanted to have it here. It was also, there are a couple of things that make us a little different. One, there isn't really an omakase option in our neighborhood or even close to us, so we kind of almost own this whole area.
I see.
But also, Johnny, our head chef, is he worked at Masa for like 7 years.
Yeah.
He was sent to Las Vegas to open the Masa in Las Vegas. So not only knows how to launch, he has like incredible creative skills. Like his recipes are amazing. He's just truly a treasure.
There's a
And
masa in Vegas now too.
yeah,
Oh
yeah,
wow! For listeners who don't know what masa is sort of the premier New York City omakase that is now, I believe, $800-900 a
I
sitting.
think
Is
it's
that correct?
1,200. I
It's
heard
1,200 now.
1,200. Yeah, yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's
yeah.
crazy.
No, exactly. Now we've had people come into our place and goes, "I remember that piece from Masa. How are you guys doing this for $95?" It's like, but the thing that makes it really unique is, Johnny's from Indonesian descent, and he has brought in ingredients and flavors from all across Asia. So when you come and have our omakase, you'll have a piece that has this incredible um, ebi, the shrimp, that has like this Indonesian curry, lightly hint of it.
Hmm.
You'll have a piece that will have Korean gochujang and kimchi flavors. We've had pieces where there was like this Sichuan mala pepper, etc. And so, part of what's so exciting about omakase is that it's a discovery every time you go. Like you're eating things that you would never have ordered and you probably never tasted before. And so the fact that we're also now expanding the scope of what you can experience. Like if you go to, one of those really expensive omakase places or even some of the cheap places, there's a kind of a rigorous Japanese version of it that you
Yes.
have. And that's not us. Like we are, we're kind of like almost like the mavericks of it, where we're trying to really expand the palate. I mean, it's still, number of pieces of nigiri. There are two appetizers, and there's an end piece, and a savory. But we really want to try to expand the palates and expand the experience so that it becomes more fun discovery process.
Hmm. Interesting. How do you think of this in relation to? Is this similar to how Kazunori is trying to make hand rolls more accessible to people? But I think they're mostly still in coastal cities and not doing as much second tier
Yeah.
cities.
So I think Kazunori is attached to Sugarfish, right?
Oh,
Aren't
are
they
they
the
the
same?
same owners? Oh, I
I,
wasn't aware.
I think so, right? I believe, I may be wrong, but I know Sugarfish has a adjunct property, and they're usually next, kind of close to each other
Mm,
physically. And so, like Sugarfish is open to all the major markets, and
yeah.
then I think Kazunori was a very clever way to use the detritus of your sushi. because they
Oh,
just chop
interesting.
it up and then put it in a hand roll. I mean, those guys are brilliant. They figured out how to like really operationalize it and make it more
Yeah.
efficient. Um, but yes and no. I mean, I think part of and pardon me if I hop on this soapbox for a second, but part of like the ulterior motive here and the agenda, when Dan and I started talking about, why we wanted to do this and the things that we wanted to accomplish by building this out. For me, when this was being ideated, we were also at a point in time where we were seeing sort of unprecedented hate crimes perpetrated against Asians.
Yes,
And
I remember.
there's a mobilization of like Asian executives, and there's another Dave Liu on the West Coast that organized this incredible letter that we published in the Wall Street Journal. And I think people kind of coming together to try to figure out, okay, how do we deal with this? I mean, they're setting our grandmothers on fire. This was like in pure insanity. And you know what? One of the things that I've learned is that, you can't browbeat people into changing their behavior or the way they think. And oftentimes what, racism is an expression of fear and the fear of the unknown or the unfamiliar. And one of the things that, became sort of like my sort of ulterior motive and drive behind this was that, look, you can hate my face. You can suspect my people. But you know what? You all love our food. And if there's a way to find like what is it? What do they call it? Like a different form of a diplomacy or a different way of changing people's minds, it's probably more effectively done through their stomachs. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things that make secondary cities kind of interesting for us is, there's probably less representation of us and our food there, but there's a greater opportunity to engage and create experiences that are really fun and interesting and flavors that are like new and to kind of change people's minds and to make us less alien and less scary. And that is also one of the reasons why it was important that, when we found Johnny and that his kind of instinct was to include these Pan-Asian flavors, I was like, yes, that's exactly like, there's a story behind every piece. There's like something that will bring the customer closer to the food, the culture, and the experience. And so, when we look at launching our next locations in Raleigh, in Dallas, in Santa Barbara, in West Palm Beach, Nashville, it's like these are places where, what, we could probably make a difference just changing the kind of cultural dialogue that's out there. And so it's not just about the food. It's not just about building a restaurant business, but it's like trying to, also make a positive impact and have social change that can come from what we do.
I love that mission. I love that. I totally agree with what you're saying. When people don't have exposure or familiarity with a different type of culture or person, that can cause, fear. It can cause angst. It can cause things. But
Totally.
if you eat the food, if you have more exposure to these type of people, then you become more familiar and you become more comfortable, and you realize, we're mostly all the same. And it reminds me of I forgot who said this quote, but they said Rush Hour did more for Asian and Black relations than any policy has ever done,
Absolutely. Absolutely. For
right?
sure. For sure.
Um, and I also remember the hate crimes that were happening towards Asian people throughout the pandemic.
Hmm.
This was really tough because I could imagine, my mom walking down the street and a hate crime targeted towards that,
Yeah.
and it was really difficult. And we actually organized a fundraiser at our business school and helped put that on to raise funds towards AAPI support groups and charities.
Right.
And that was a time where I felt really close and connected to my Asian
Right.
heritage, and wanted to rally with fellow Asian friends and colleagues and
Yeah.
classmates to do something.
No,
So
I think it really took a crisis to bring everyone kind of like to get together, and
yes,
because Asians are notoriously sort of like the interscene combat that's there is built in, but like I think everyone was like, wait a minute, like we have to really bond together here and
yeah,
help.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. So back to Kinjo. you have pretty grand plans, it seems. You want to open quite a few restaurants over the next few years. Tell me a little bit about you not wanting to invest in a restaurant to now how much you are going to invest, and if you're raising money from other people, and how the expansion plans are actually going to work out.
Yeah, so one of the first things that we wanted to make sure people understood, particularly our investors, was that this was not your mom and pop sort of restaurant that we're trying to, you know, sustain, but that this is more like a tech startup. And so we structured our investment vehicle in the form of a safe.
Okay.
And so, uh, and then the other kind of strategic decision was, I think for this space, because it was raw and it's much larger than what we normally need, but it's a flagship, and so it was a place where we were going to be doing, I think, a lot more entertaining and kind of promoting of the brand. So we invested more here than we would the other locations. We also made the decision to try to bring in as many investors as possible with smaller sums. It's always a lot easier to get like one or two big checks and just be done.
Yeah.
But there were, Kinjo means neighborhood.
Mm.
And one of the things that we wanted really people to feel was a sense of ownership of this place, that it is their space, it's their third space. It's like, they come here and be with this extended family or feel like they belong, and they have a piece of ownership of it too. So we have a lot of people in the neighborhood and the community that have invested, and when they come in, the staff know them to be fellow owners of the space, and so it
Yeah.
creates a real sort of community vibe, and that was important. As much as it makes it difficult, from just from managing the size of the cohort, I think it's important that there was a sense of embracing of that community, and that's really been amazing. I feel like what we've been able to demonstrate is that if you build with intentionality a space that was designed for the community, then it kind of it informs a lot of the different decisions you make. If we wanted to make this a destination place, like special occasion place, that would force us to adjust our price point higher. We would do
Hmm.
different types of marketing. We'd be trying to promote in different places. We're much more about like, I want to make sure if my neighbors come, they can get a seat. Like I don't want people to have to wait, a month or be like at midnight waiting for the reservations to open up. And I know this is like, this is blasphemous for any restaurateurs out there because they're probably think I'm crazy, but like, I want people to be able to come in and feel comfortable and feel like they have access to it.
That's crazy. That's a revolutionary thought in New York now, because it's
Right?
it's impossible to go anywhere these days.
No, it's true. And I love a lot of those restaurants that are hard to get into. Don't,
Sure.
make a mistake, they're amazing, but that's not what we want to do. Um, and I think also because of the economics of it, um, you know, based on the numbers, I think I can only serve and feed 40 people a night in the omakase room. So think about that for a second. As a restaurant, like not 40 tables that need to turn twice, not like it's like 40 people. And so it really is an intimate experience, and you're really only able to service a pretty small geographic area,
Hmm.
and so again, it makes you think about, how do you create a space that's comfortable for your community, and we, you know, I had invested in one other restaurant in the past, and it was when Carla and I were starting our business. We had a friend who was launching his restaurant in Soho, like a block away, and it was called Cendrillon. Romy Dortan and Amy, his wife, opened it. It was the most incredible Filipino food, and he was really bucking the trend of trying to create an elevated Asian food experience, which is
Yeah.
really hard, right? I mean, like, everyone just thinks Asian food is cheap, and if it's expensive, you're getting ripped off. And nice, for whatever reason, Japanese food has always been able to maintain that level of like, high end experience. But all us other Asian cultures were like, okay, you're just slinging food, and
Mm.
it's supposed to be cheap and good. That's good. It's cheap.
Yeah. Although
Um,
the Koreans are doing really well in
True.
New York. I've
Yeah,
been really
exactly.
impressed with the high-end restaurants.
Yes, that's true. The creators have been breakthrough, but
But
they're
yeah,
doing really well across the board. I don't know what they're doing, but I don't know how they're doing it. But like they're crushing it.
I don't. Yeah, I don't know what they feed them over there to create,
Right,
K-pop and become
right,
such
right, right.
culture carriers throughout the
Yeah,
world. It's been impressive.
yeah. But and so watching him build that, and then like the lease was up, they couldn't afford it. It was on Mercer, in the middle of Soho. He moved his operations out to Ditmas, and they launched Purple Yam. And when they needed funding for it, I lent them money. It was money I was never going to see come back. I knew that, I felt like I was a patron of the arts. I wanted him to continue cooking. I wanted him and Amy to be able to continue to create this amazing experience. They've since retired and they had to close, and it was heartbreaking. But it was an incredible run, and the food was incredible, and that was my understanding of how restaurants operated. Right, like there's no concept of like, oh, invest and exit. Like, what is a restaurant exit? Like, I don't, I don't think I ever heard of one.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like things have changed now, and one of the opportunities that we see is that, in the past, a lot of the private equity firms and the big finance people, they only got interested in hospitality if it was like, oh, well, let's buy Olive Garden or Red Lobster. They're in trouble. Load it up with debt, shut down a third of their storefronts, get rid of the free breadsticks, squeeze a profit, and then flip it. And I think a lot of them are now realizing that actually, if you want to create value, it's going from 1 to 3 to 4 or 5 doors to like 20 to 30 doors to maybe even more. That if you have a base model that's replicable and profitable, and you can start building out. There's a real, there's a lot of money to be made. There's like a huge opportunity. And so, that's the dream we're chasing now.
Okay.
We think in 5 years, if we could have 20 or 30 of these around the country, and it's servicing communities in the way that we service our community here, we could create something really unique and different and could be transformative for the industry.
Hmm. What do you think the market size for this is, or how many restaurants can Kinjo get to, at the end state?
Um, you know, literally every city in America, every city in America, and back at the Nod, we had offices in Austin, we had offices in Omaha, we had in LA, we had it in Redding, California. And then, and when I went out to see my staff in Omaha, we go out to nice dinners and stuff. It's like I could see an omakase restaurant, like a Kinjo omakase in Omaha.
Uh,
I could see one in like Des Moines. I could see one in Minneapolis. Like there could be hundreds of these. You know,
Interesting. Yeah, this is a very interesting insight because why isn't there a good omakase in non-coastal cities? You know,
right?
people should have access everywhere to this.
Yeah, and even in Brooklyn today, like it's amazing when you see people and they come in, they're like, oh yeah, I've never tried omakase before, and when they walk out, they're like, oh my gosh, it was incredible. You know,
Yeah.
that excitement. Like think about that. Like when was the last time you walked out of a restaurant with that kind of excitement? And I feel like that's a bit of what we're promoting in marketing and what we're creating for people. It's like this moment of discovery. This new experience. You're being hand fed by someone, and you're watching them prepare this piece with incredible, skill. And so it feels like a no-brainer. Like it feels like, of course, this will happen. We just want to be the brand that brings it there.
Yeah.
And if we're not, someone else will for sure. Like it's just going to happen. Like there are a lot of groups out there that are doing it, but they're all doing it on the high-end side, which is kind of. I mean, I get it, and again, I don't want to yuck their yum. I think it's a great approach.
Hmm.
But omakase was the original street food. Like in the Edo period, like it was created as almost like a stand by the sidewalk or by the street where the fishermen would come with their fresh catch of the day, and they would like make pieces of nigiri for people to have. And then you come up to the stand and you just ate what was caught and what was fresh, and you ate until you're full, and then you left.
Mm.
I feel like we in the West turned it into this luxury item.
Yeah.
It first appeared on the lower right hand part of the menu that said omakase, like $300, and then these dedicated omakase counters appeared, and it was like $200, $300, $700 a seat, and those are incredible experiences, and I loved going to them, but that's not what we want to create. We want this to be far more accessible. We want people to be like, wow, I'm jonesing for some good sushi. Let's go to Kinjo tonight.
Mm.
And have it be accessible to everybody.
I like that. David, what does your day to day look like now with Kinjo?
Um, Fortunately, they don't need me to do anything here because I'd be a disaster. I, I did work in restaurants when I was a kid. Like
Sure.
I was dishwashed at a Japanese restaurant called Chocho-san up in Thornwood in Westchester. I had to bartend down in Soho, and I was told by one of my patrons I was the worst bartender he'd ever experienced. I was a
Why
short
why
order
was that?
cook.
What did you do
Oh my
wrong?
God, I didn't know what I was doing. The guy ordered a Tom Collins. I was like going through the recipe book, and I was just kept pouring. It was like I just kept pouring more and more stuff in there. I mean, he was very sweet because he still tipped me because I think he thought I was cute. But I was like, oh no, it was so embarrassing. And then
Oh man.
I was like a short order cook at the Tunnel Cafe on 33rd Street, like flipping burgers. I mean, this was not my. I was terrible at it. I was terrible at it. When I was
I
a
see.
waiter, I was like, I bring glasses of water one at a time, as opposed to like, I was not efficient. My brain didn't work that way. So fortunately, they don't need me here.
I see.
My job is to find the other locations, find the other partners, and find the money and the investors. Johnny has got the food down. We have Yudi and Bertha, Bertha's our general manager. Yudi's our captain. We have the most amazing staff here.
That's great. You're the
And Dan, my
evangelist.
CFO. Yeah, I'm the evangelist, exactly.
I love that. There's a great restaurant that just opened up in Dumbo. We just had her on the podcast, actually. It's called Ziggy's.
Oh my
Helen
God, I
Zhang.
love Helen. I love Helen. I'm Helen's biggest fan. Like,
Oh, she's
yeah,
great. The
she's
pizza's
fantastic.
amazing. The cocktails were exceptional. I was very
Yep.
impressed especially for a kid friendly place. Yeah.
No, totally. And so she's someone who's like doing it right. And hopefully we'll get like richly rewarded for it because she built it for the community.
Yeah.
It's like the space she took over, we've watched like 3 or 4 restaurants churn through. And each one of them came in with this notion that, oh my God, like Dumbo's this fancy schmancy place, and everyone's rich, so let's charge $28 cocktails. Let's serve a pasta plate and charge $30, and she was like, no, I want to build something for the community. Our community is like a lot of young families. Make it kid friendly, make it affordable, like have your hours be relevant to the young couples here, and
Yeah.
so. Yeah, yeah, I'm a huge fan, and if there's one other place I'll go to in Dumbo, it's her place.
I love it. I love it. Um, David, sort of looking back on your extensive career and journey, and now, starting Kinjo and getting into the restaurant and hospitality space, is there anything you would have changed knowing what you know now?
Uh, there's there are probably lots of little decisions that could have reduced the pain factor of some of the stuff because you're just learning as you go, but those are less consequential.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't change anything. I mean, it's been an incredibly strange and journey with twists and turns. And my advice to a lot of young people, and my kids included, is you can't really plan for the future, but you can plan to be prepared for sort of the unexpected twists and turns, and that's usually when good things happen.
Mm.
It's when you're prepared to actually take advantage of the serendipitous moments. And I would say serendipity has played a far greater role in the journey of my life than probably most, and has made me really conscious of what it requires to be open to that and to maintain a state of curiosity,
Yeah.
um, to be willing to learn, about launching a restaurant, running an oyster farm. It's like you just have to kind of be embracing of what the world suddenly sends your direction, as opposed to, wait a minute, this is my path. I'm just going to stick to my path. I need to get from here to there, because then you lose all the incredible things that are probably beckoning you, but you are not paying attention to.
That's great. And David, I also wanted to hear a little bit about, how it's been working with your wife and being both a life and business partner for so long as well. My wife
Yeah,
also helps me a lot with things that I do. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
yeah. Well, we joke. We say, don't try this at home. It's not for the faint of heart. Um, it's been the highs are higher than anything else. The lows are lower than any experience you could possibly have. I mean, I think Carly and I complement each other really well. Like we are opposites, which make our fights like unbelievably intense. But it means that we're able to cover more ground and execute on just about anything we do in a way that allows us to, I think, really take advantage of our experience and our skill sets. She's like really good with the details and the design and the messaging and the marketing, and so she's been helping out with all that stuff, which I wouldn't know how would even begin, focusing on that stuff. Um, you know, but I seriously recommend people not to work with their spouses. You know, because part of the problem is there's a practical issue where if you are working together, you're actually doubling down on the risk of that operation, right? If you're a couple and you both have different jobs, one goes off and does this entrepreneurial thing, you have the stability of this other's, salaries and stuff. But when you have two people working the same thing, and launching and starting business is really hard and is
Yeah.
fraught, that puts a lot more pressure, undue pressure. And that kind of pressure and that kind of stress will force you to make bad decisions, or it doesn't give you the ability to make the right decisions because you're in a panic mode. You're in fight and flight mode. And then the other side is, normal couples come home and they say, "Oh, honey, that guy Alan, what a jerk! Like, do you know he did blah blah blah?" And then you as the spouse will be like, "Wow, he's such a jerk." And it's like, but now when you're working together, you come back, you're like, "Oh my God, look, that Alan guy, he's really a jerk." And it's like, "But is he? Like, did you hear what he said?" And you're like, "Whoa, what are you talking? Are you taking his side?" And it's like, and it just creates undue stress
I
and
see.
conflict.
But
So
David, you made it work.
we did make it work. I mean, part of it was like, look, we built a wedding company. The founders of the wedding company can't separate. So like,
Ah.
we're handcuffed.
You found the
We
one
have to make it
loophole.
work.
You found the one
Exactly.
loophole to make it work if you were starting a
Exactly. We
business together.
have to make it
Ah, that's incredible.
work.
Well, David, this has been a lot of fun. If people want to follow along the journey or get involved, what's the best way for them to do so?
Yeah, I mean, reaching out to me, I'm always open to chat and to learn from them, as well to impart whatever knowledge I have that could potentially help people. Like I said, I'm sort of in that give back phase of my life where it's, you know, there's one thing I feel like us Asians have been really bad at. We haven't been helpful to each other. And at least my generation. I think your
Yeah.
younger generation, there's a lot more community being built and a lot more, generosity of spirit. But my generation, I think the opportunities were so scarce that like you got the feeling that once you got in the room, you're like, okay, I'm here. There's only room for one of us. So like everyone else, you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like we're really at a time now where it's super important to like lean into our community and to help each other advance in various forms, and really to take what I would call positions of power where we actually have influence and the ability to make change and the ability to make policy and to ideally create a place where people aren't afraid of us anymore.
Yeah, I love that. We'll include some links in the show notes,
Cool.
yeah, to you as well. And yeah, really appreciate you taking the time today. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and if anyone's in Brooklyn, come on down. We have like amazing Pan Asian spirits, the incredible the Koreans just came up. They just won the best whiskey last year. I mean, they're just literally crushing it on all fronts.
The wait, Korea
There's a
did?
Korean whiskey, yeah,
Oh
in the
my
world
gosh.
whiskey competition, yeah.
Well, I also saw that Korea just won the best croissant.
No way, really?
It was like it was a baking competition in Paris or something, but they won
Oh my
the
God.
best croissant,
Oh
and
my
it's incredible.
God.
My wife is Korean, so
Okay,
we
good.
visit quite a bit in Korea, and I'm just fascinated by the attention to detail and the
Yeah.
hospitality and like the innovation that happens there.
Oh,
It's
totally.
incredible.
Yeah, and the entrepreneurship too. It's just like it's intense.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
All right, David. Well, I'm gonna let you go, but thanks again, and yeah, my audience, I think they're gonna really love this one.
No, thanks for having me. Hope to